Some buildings become eternal. The pyramids have stood for 4,500 years. The Colosseum survived the fall of Rome. The Parthenon still watches over Athens. These monuments outlasted the empires that built them, proof that stone and ambition can defy time itself. But what about the buildings that didn't survive? The ones just as magnificent, just as important, just as legendary, that vanished completely. In this video, I use modern AI tools to reconstruct these lost structures from historical records, archaeological sites, drawings and paintings, allowing us to shift perspective, change camera angles, and move through spaces that haven't existed for centuries. We begin with perhaps the most mysterious structure on this list. In ancient Babylon, around 600 BCE. This 19th century illustration shows how artists imagined the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. But this is just speculation, because the truth is, we have no idea what they actually looked like. Notice how I've kept the vivid colors from the original illustration, because this is fantasy, but it's fantasy that represents something deeper. Humanity's defiance of nature itself, green rising impossibly from desert heat. The legend says a king built it for his homesick wife. Whether true or not, that story endured because it spoke to power, love, and ambition. When evidence vanishes, imagination fills the void. So did this building never exist? There's no clear answer to that, but what we do know is this. What you're seeing now is a reconstruction based on how Greek and Roman writers described it centuries later, their words brought to life through AI. But here's the problem. No Babylonian records mention it, even though they documented everything else. These Greek and Roman authors never saw it themselves. They were repeating stories. They described terrace platforms, exotic trees, and water lifted by mechanical systems. But were they describing reality, or repeating a legend that had already grown larger than life? Some scholars now think the gardens might have been in Nineveh, not Babylon, 300 miles north, because Assyrian records do describe a magnificent royal garden built by King Sennacherib, complete with irrigation systems and exotic plants. From myth to monument. In 331 BCE, Alexander the Great founded a city on Egypt's Mediterranean coast. And on a small island just off the harbour, rose one of the tallest structures the ancient world had ever seen. This is how archaeologist Hermann Thiersch reconstructed the Lighthouse of Alexandria in 1909, based on ancient coins, descriptions, and ruins he found at the site. Unlike the Hanging Gardens, this structure definitely existed. Thiersch's reconstruction wasn't guesswork. He studied ancient coins that showed the lighthouse, read dozens of eyewitness accounts, and examined the actual ruins still visible in Alexandria's harbour. His drawing became the foundation for how we imagine it today. The Pharos stood over 100 meters tall, roughly 30 stories, making it the tallest structure on Earth for over 1,000 years. 3 distinct tiers, a square base, an octagonal middle section, and a circular top where fire burned every night. Now imagine you're a merchant sailor approaching Alexandria after weeks at sea. The sun is setting, and suddenly you see it, a tower of white marble rising impossibly high above the harbour, fire blazing at its peak. But what if we ignore Thiersch's drawing entirely? This reconstruction comes purely from ancient eyewitness accounts, their words translated directly into AI. The descriptions don't always agree on details, But the core remains consistent. 3 tiers, white stone, fire at the peak, visible for miles. Some accounts mention a massive mirror at the top that could reflect sunlight by day and magnify fire by night. Possibly myth, possibly early optics. A series of earthquakes between the 10th and 14th centuries gradually brought it down. By 1480, its stones were being used to build a fortress. Alexandria lost more than just the lighthouse. The great library, home to hundreds of thousands of ancient texts, was also destroyed through fires and neglect over the centuries. An entire world of knowledge gone. The lighthouse guided ships for 15 centuries. The library preserved the thoughts of civilizations. Both vanished, leaving only fragments and memories behind. Around 280 BCE, on the Greek island of Rhodes, a massive bronze statue rose above the harbour. At least, that's the legend. This is how the world imagined the Colossus of Rhodes for centuries. This 1572 engraving is the earliest known depiction in modern times. A giant bronze statue straddling the harbour, ships sailing between its legs. It's iconic, and it's completely impossible. A statue standing like this would have blocked the harbour during the 12 years it took to build. Ancient sources never describe it this way, but this myth stuck. For over 400 years, this is what people imagined, and many people still picture it this way today. The real Colossus was just as remarkable. It just didn't look like this. This is an AI reconstruction based purely on ancient eyewitness descriptions. The Colossus stood on a marble pedestal near the harbour entrance, not straddling it. Over 30 meters tall, it depicted Helios, the sun god. The Rhodians built it as a victory monument after defending their island from a massive siege in 305 BCE. They melted down enemy bronze and shaped it into plates, assembling them piece by piece over an iron framework. Not cast as one solid statue, and it stood for just 56 years. In 226 BCE, an earthquake snapped it at the knees. Here's the strangest part. It lay broken near the harbour for over 800 years. People travelled to Rhodes just to see the fallen giant. In 654 CE, it was finally sold for scrap, reportedly taking 900 camels to carry away. The Colossus stood for barely a lifetime. Its legend has lasted over 2,000 years. These wonders proved what humanity could achieve in the ancient world. But wonders alone don't build empires. Infrastructure does. For example, military infrastructure built to control the seas and dominate trade. For centuries, one empire dominated the Western Mediterranean, not Rome, but Carthage. A trading empire built on sea power, controlling ports from North Africa to Spain. And at the heart of that power was something most people have never heard of, a harbour unlike anything else in the ancient world. Unlike the previous structures, no medieval artist drew the Cothon. When Rome destroyed Carthage in 146 BCE, they erased it so completely that it vanished from memory. This AI reconstruction is based solely on Roman accounts and modern archaeology. The Cothon was a circular military harbour that could shelter 220 warships, hidden by high walls. At its centre stood an island command post, the naval headquarters of a maritime superpower. Ships were stored in covered docks around the perimeter, protected and ready to launch. This wasn't just a harbour, it was a weapon. Imagine standing on those docks, the smell of tar and salt, the sound of oars being loaded, crews preparing for deployment. Above you, admirals watching from the central island could coordinate the entire fleet. 200 warships ready to launch within hours. That's the kind of infrastructure that made Rome afraid. When Rome finally defeated Carthage, they systematically destroyed it, burned it, and filled in the harbour. Today, only shallow water and archaeological traces mark where it once stood. In ancient Rome, everyone knows the Colosseum, or as they called it, the Flavian Amphitheatre, the empire's most famous monument. But just south of it stood something equally massive, yet far less remembered: the Baths of Caracalla, or the Thermae Antoninianae, one of the largest public complexes Rome ever built. This AI reconstruction is based on the ruins that still stand today, archaeological evidence, and Roman texts. I've cut half the roof and walls off so you can see inside. The baths could hold 1,600 people at once. Hot rooms, cold rooms, pools, libraries, gardens, exercise courts. This was Rome's social centre. Romans spent hours here, exercising, bathing, making deals, debating philosophy. The ruins survive today, but what's gone is the life, the marble, the mosaics, the sound of water and voices echoing through vast halls. The functioning heart of a civilization. The real marvel? The engineering hidden beneath. Water flowed from mountain aqueducts at 70 litres per second, stored in massive cisterns built into the hillside. Below ground, 50 brick furnaces burned constantly, heating copper tanks that supplied 7 hot pools in the caldarium. A 3-kilometre tunnel system carried water throughout the complex, feeding both hot baths and cold swimming pools before draining away. Now look at the scale of this operation. Those furnaces burned 24 hours a day, tended by slaves working in shifts below ground. The heat didn't just warm water, it radiated through hollow floors and walls, keeping entire rooms at precise temperatures. The hillside location wasn't accidental. Building into the slope gave them natural pressure for the water system and space for the massive furnace complex, without disrupting the experience above. Romans lounging in hot pools had no idea they were sitting above an industrial operation. This level of engineering, controlling water temperature, managing airflow, coordinating fuel supply, wouldn't be matched in Europe for over 1,000 years after Rome fell. The baths operated for 3 centuries, but the technology behind them defined what was possible. While Rome's empire crumbled in the west, a new capital rose in the east, Constantinople. At its heart stood the Great Palace, a vast complex of halls, churches, gardens, and throne rooms stretching from the hippodrome to the sea. The centre of Byzantine power for over 800 years. The Great Palace wasn't a single building, it was a city within a city. Emperors ruled from throne rooms overlooking the Bosporus, watching ships arrive from the Mediterranean, Black Sea, and trade routes to Asia. Private harbours sat directly below the royal quarters. Control the palace, control the sea. Control the sea, control the empire. This reconstruction is based on archaeological remains and Byzantine texts. On the left, the Hippodrome, where 100,000 spectators watched chariot races while emperors presided from the royal box connected directly to the palace. At the centre, massive throne rooms where emperors received foreign ambassadors in ceremonies designed to overwhelm with Byzantine wealth and power. And just beyond the palace walls, the Hagia Sophia, the empire's grandest cathedral, still standing today. But the palace itself? Gone. The complex covered over 400,000 square meters. It took 15 minutes just to walk from one end to the other. Imagine walking these halls. As an emperor, you'd wake overlooking the Bosporus, then sit on a golden throne as foreign kings bowed. As a soldier, you'd guard corridors, watching for coups. As a merchant, you'd wait hours in antechambers, one word away from fortune or ruin. As a slave, you'd work in lower levels, invisible, keeping the empire running. And always, the roar of 100,000 voices from the hippodrome echoing through the walls. The Great Palace gradually crumbled after the 13th century, abandoned and quarried for stone. Today, only scattered ruins mark where Byzantine emperors once ruled for 800 years. Empires rise and fall, but faith endures. The Great Palace is gone, yet the Hagia Sophia still dominates Istanbul's skyline, a reminder that sacred spaces often outlive the powers that built them, or at least they try to. But sometimes, sacred spaces don't fall to conquest or fire. They're destroyed by the faithful themselves in pursuit of something greater. This is Old St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, around the year 1450, drawn in 1891 from ancient records. Built by Emperor Constantine in 330 CE, on what Christians believed was the burial site of St. Peter himself. It stood as the holiest church in Christendom for over 1,200 years. This reconstruction is based on floor plans made just before demolition, medieval frescoes, and centuries of written descriptions. So we actually have a good idea of what it looked like. This is the entrance courtyard, the atrium where pilgrims gathered before entering the basilica. Above the entrance hung the famous Navicella mosaic, created around 1310, showing St. Peter walking on water. Imagine arriving here after months of travel, passing through these colonnades, the mosaic towering above you, knowing you were standing at the holiest site in Christianity. For over a millennium, popes were crowned here, emperors knelt here, and millions of pilgrims crossed this threshold, seeking salvation. In 1506, Pope Julius II ordered the ancient basilica demolished to build the grand Renaissance church that stands today, a controversial decision that destroyed 1,200 years of history in pursuit of architectural glory. But our next cathedral didn't get to choose its fate, but rather was burned to the ground. This is London in the year 1381. In medieval London, one structure dominated the skyline: Old St. Paul's Cathedral, with a spire reaching higher than any building in England. This 1550 drawing shows it with that famous spire still intact. Old St. Paul's stretched 178 meters, the third longest cathedral in Europe, but it was the spire that defined London. At 149 meters tall, it towered over everything, visible for miles. This was more than a church, it was the city's heart. Markets filled the churchyard, lawyers met clients inside, merchants made deals in the nave. For 6 centuries, that spire stood. Then, on June 4th, 1561, lightning struck. The wooden structure burned for hours as the city watched. The spire collapsed and was never rebuilt. For the next 105 years, Old St. Paul's stood without its crown. Let's see what that looked like. This is how it stood for the next century, still massive, still imposing, but incomplete. The rose window on the western facade became the new focal point, a masterpiece of Gothic stonework. Imagine walking through these streets in the 1600s. The cathedral still dominated the cityscape, but Londoners knew something was missing. For a generation who had never seen the spire, this was normal. For those who remembered, it was a constant reminder of loss. This 1658 engraving by Wenceslaus Hollar shows the interior. Rows of soaring Gothic arches stretching toward the altar. Imagine standing here, dwarfed by columns rising 30 meters overhead, light filtering through ancient stained glass. medieval England's greatest architectural achievement. By 1666, the cathedral was over 600 years old and badly in need of repair. Then came September, and everything changed. September 2nd, 1666. The Great Fire of London had raged for 2 days through the densely packed medieval city. Londoners thought St. Paul's stone walls might survive. They were wrong. When the fire reached the cathedral, it found scaffolding and wooden roofs dried by centuries. The lead roof melted and poured through the building like water. Stone exploded from the heat. Witnesses heard the cathedral's bells melting, crashing through burning timbers. In hours, what lightning had started 105 years earlier, the Great Fire finished. 600 years of history reduced to smoking ruins. London's skyline would never look the same. This is what remained. Londoners walked through the smoking rubble of their greatest cathedral, surrounded by the scorched skeleton of medieval London. The western facade still stood, hollow and broken. The rose window, once filled with intricate stonework, was now an empty void. But London rebuilt, the ruins were cleared, and between 1675 and 1710, Christopher Wren constructed the new St. Paul's Cathedral, the Baroque masterpiece with the iconic dome that still stands today. That medieval cathedral, with its soaring spire and Gothic arches, gone forever. While sacred monuments reached toward heaven, other structures became symbols of something more earthly. This is London in 1616. There's old St. Paul's. And there's Old London Bridge, another long foregone structure, which I covered more in this previous video. But look here, on the south bank of the Thames in Southwark, stood a building that changed English literature forever. Southwark was London's entertainment district, where regular laws didn't apply. The Globe stood right next to the Bear Garden, where crowds watched animals fight for sport. But only one would stage the greatest works in the English language. This is where William Shakespeare's plays came to life. Between 1599 and 1613, this theatre saw the premieres of Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, Macbeth, plays that defined world literature. The Globe made theatre accessible to everyone, creating a shared cultural experience that had never existed before. This is a reconstruction based on archaeological evidence and surviving documents. Our best guess at what the Globe actually looked like inside. A polygonal structure, open to the sky in the center. 3 tiers of covered galleries wrapped around an open yard, where groundlings stood for a penny.
What monstrous thing have we now become?
The stage jutted out into the crowd, so actors were surrounded on 3 sides.
This is the only way forward now.
No distance between performer and audience. Behind the stage, a tiring house where actors changed costumes. Above it, a balcony for scenes like the famous Romeo, Romeo moment. The thatched roof covered only the galleries and stage. The yard remained open, meaning performances happened in daylight.
What's in a name?
Rain or shine,
That
the
which
show
we
went
call
on.
a rose?
In 1642, Puritan authorities closed all London theatres, and in 1644, the Globe was demolished. The building that gave the world Shakespeare's greatest works stood for less than 50 years total. But in Paris, as the old world collapsed and revolutions swept through Europe, one last structure would fall, torn down stone by stone as a symbol of everything they fought against. This is the Bastille in 1420, drawn from an 1886 reconstruction. 8 massive towers guarding eastern Paris. Built in the 1370s as a fortress with a moat and 30-meter walls, it defended the city for centuries. But over time, its purpose changed. The fortress, designed to keep enemies out, became a prison to keep prisoners in, a symbol of royal power and oppression. By the early 1700s, the Bastille had become infamous. No longer a military fortress, it served as a state prison, where the king could imprison anyone through lettre de cachet. Royal orders that required no trial, no charges, no appeal. Writers, political dissidents, religious minorities, anyone who displeased the monarchy could disappear behind these walls. The fortress still stood imposing above Paris, but what it represented had changed. It was no longer protection, it was oppression. July 14th, 1789. Revolutionary crowds stormed the Bastille, attacking what the fortress represented: centuries of royal tyranny and arbitrary imprisonment. After hours of fighting, the garrison surrendered. Inside, they found only 7 prisoners. The fortress had become more symbol than active prison. But symbols matter. Within months, the Bastille was dismantled stone by stone. Some stones were carved into souvenirs, others used to build bridges. The fortress that stood for 400 years was deliberately erased, not by time or accident, but by revolution itself. July 14th is now France's national day. The building is gone, but what destroying it meant echoes through history. 10 legendary structures, sadly erased from the earth, but their stories endure. What should I reconstruct next? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.